All right. Hey guys, what's up? Happy Saturday morning. Um, Coming at you with no major schedule to this stream or anything. Just kind of thinking out loud exactly what the title is. That's There's been a few things go on recently in the kind of the nutrient realm, or in general actually, the whole cannabis horticulture realm, with Apogee and Bruce Bugbee starting to release some of their thoughts, their studies, their impressions, their reviews, whatever you want to call it. They haven't really released a lot of the actual hard fact data to be able to do this, but in general, they're talking about what they've found, what they're doing, what they're using, and what's successful on cannabis. Now, they're using some hemp varieties, but Bruce, he has grown pure cannabis varieties. We'll just say that. Regardless, they're talking about some things, and of course that's stirring up some questions, some controversy for whatever reasons, but just some questions in general, and that's perfectly valid, and I don't see why it's not. And these are questions that I don't have the answers to. A lot of people don't have the answers to, and the best answer I can give you is there is no surefire hard fact perfect line answer to any of these, and that's essentially what is the best nutrients for cannabis. Without any studies to compare other formulas with, it's hard to take everything for exactly what it might be there. Let me pull up chat here. Let me get the stream going. But that's kind of what I just want to talk to you guys about. I'm going to share with you what Bruce and those guys say. I'm going to share with you again what we talk about with the recipes that we do know who have been recommended for cannabis, the 3-1-4, which is equivalent to the 3-to-1 ratio of Jacks. Okay, so we're back. So you guys get the dish. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of connective issues here lately, but is what it is. No big deal. We're back. We're running. Let me pull up chat, make sure everything is groovy here. We can pause this and pop out chat here. Pop out chat. Bam, we're done. Maybe we're not done. Okay. So we got a few people in here. Who's hanging out? All right, we got 150 heads in here. This is good enough to go. So go down to 33. All right. So like I said, Bruce has presented what he is saying, and he's not actually, he shouldn't say this. A lot of people are taking his words, and I'll point them out in the video, a little astray from what they're actually saying. He's saying, in short, that they found a general nutrient formula that's relatively balanced, even across the board, that works well for a variety of crops and works great for cannabis. That's no surprise to us, guys. Look at all the nutrient regimens out there right now. Look at how much potassium some have, some have so little, nitrogen levels, this, that. They all work. Some work, quote unquote, better than others. Some are a little more reliable. Some have less buildup. Some have this, that, la-di-da-di-da. But they all grow some pretty damn good plants, and enough that you would have arguments on each one of them to support it, saying this is the best or this isn't the best. So without some hard fact data, we can't say much other than, yes, cannabis will grow under a variety of nutrient recipes that are good for other plants. If it's a ridiculous, doesn't work for any other plant, it's probably not going to work well for cannabis. But if it works well for other plants, especially similar plants, highlight variety plants, it's probably going to work very well. And if you just wanted to end it now, that's the gist of this whole thing, is that a lot of applicable recipes will work well with cannabis here. But anyway, so we go to YouTube. You can go. I just do it real quick. You can see at the top here. I searched Apogee instruments. Go there, and when you do click videos, it takes you to their most recent. And this is about the second video back released right now. We're looking at maximizing cannabis yields for home growers with Dr. Bruce Bugbee. If you don't know Bruce, he's basically the #1 plant physiologist in the world right now when it comes to being in front of the media and presenting. And when it comes to cannabis specifically, He's a very big figure, even though he doesn't necessarily mean to be, just based on the research he's doing. On top of that, he owns Apogee Instruments, which I have my par meter in my room, so I can't show you, but manufacturer of some of the first, other than Lycor, the first kind of home hobbyist par meters, and have since then released the 500 series, which is incredibly accurate and competes with the Lycor, and now these new 620 series that can do extended range and really help out on the LED fronts. They do have some specificities, I don't know if that's the word, but they only work for LEDs. They can't be used on bulb sources or fluoros or any other kind of sort of similar devices, but for LEDs they work absolutely fantastic. So that's another thing Bruce does. Anyway, let me play this clip here and we're just going to go into it. This is, again, 33 minutes into the video. He's gone through his temps. He's gone through his oxygen. He does talk about some silica and some other things, but he's gone through his medium. I believe his medium is also part of the reason this nutrient works very well for him, but nonetheless, goes through all that. You can watch the whole video. It's 45 minutes. If you don't have 45 minutes to give, but you have questions, you need to rethink it. Give it the full 45 minutes, then present your questions. Anyway, let's watch it. Now I guess I have to.
It will drain out. You want to be sure you have a tray under this.
Okay. Sorry.
Through this. And now let's
right.
put in red.
This guy reminds me of my grandpa so much. My grandpa's name's Ted. He looks just like him, talks just like him. It's unbelievable.
Put nutrients in here. What do we use for nutrients? Many companies sell special nutrients. We have tested many things over the years. I teach a class in Principles of Plant Nutrition. It uses this big, heavy textbook, Mineral Nutrition of Higher Plants. So we've analyzed nutrients a lot, and we've done many tests here. We have found we use the same fertilizer that we use for all of our other plants. Wheat plants, corn plants, tomato plants. We can recommend a general fertilizer that works well for this.
All right, so that's we really want to key in on that right there, guys. He says they use a fertilizer that works well for his wheat plants, his corn plants, his any plant they grow at the university. They're essentially using at least the same base nutrients. If they want to do experiments, they obviously manipulate as need be, but they have a general nutrient plan that works well for all plants. Well, you guys know me, you've been following me for a long time. So Jax, the 3-2-1, the hydroponic recipe, that's another formula out there that's exactly that. Works well for all kinds of plants, leafy greens, fruiting plants, vegetative growth, flowering growth, reproductive. It's another one of these, quote unquote balanced formulas that works extremely well. And that's very similar to what Bruce is doing. And in fact, he is using a Jax mix. It's just not the hydro mix. He's using, not exactly sure what he's using, but he is using a Jax mix. I have some suspicions, and we'll talk about which ones they might be here. But anyway, we'll let him go forward. Essentially, he's saying, they have, without knowing the testing as well. I keep saying that we need to see that testing that's showing this formula is better because, boom, it produced more flower biomass, it produced more overall biomass, produced bigger roots, shoots. What is the actual data presenting that says it's special? That's what's needed. But anyway, he says it's a formula that works well across the board.
Come with three numbers, N and P and K.
Okay, now this is important, and I have a question here on, you can see, we'll scroll down, my question's right here. Hey, Bruce, in your NPK ratio, is that actual P and K, or is that phosphate and potassium oxide? Essentially, the difference is that when you look at a bucket, here, before we go back, let's change back to me. When you look at a bucket, it's hard to see, but essentially we got these three numbers. For the Jax, it's the 5, 12, and 26. Well, that nitrogen, we're okay with taking the full amount of ppm of nitrogen in nitrate. However, the the phosphate and the potassium, those are not pure phosphor and potassium numbers. Those are phosphate, so we're talking. So for phosphate, we're talking P2O5, so that it's 2 phosphor, 5 oxygen molecules. That extra weight is making up of ppm and some other percentages. But long story short, P and K on the nutrient bottles or the tubs or the bags or whatever it may be is not pure P and K. Now, when we do the nutrient calculations, as I've shown you guys in the past, we talk about actual ppm of K and P. Now, so basically what it comes down to is when you reduce these down to their actual P and K values, P goes from the full phosphate down to just pure P. It gets reduced by, it comes out to 43% of what it once was. So if it was 100 ppm of phosphate, P2O5, it's actually only 43 ppm of phosphor. And that's very important. And Bruce doesn't make this distinction in here, so there's a little bit of ambiguity. We don't know what's going on. That's the problem here. We don't know what exactly he's talking about in his ratios, but we'll let him continue here. Let him continue, and he will talk about his ideal ratio.
Is 20-10-20.
So 20-10-20 is what he's saying is their general purpose, which is exactly that. It is Jack's general purpose formula. It's a general purpose feeder, and general purpose for general purpose. It makes perfect sense here. This isn't rocket science. But what essentially this formula is saying, if that's actual N, P, and K, then on the bottle it should be 20 by 20 dash like 23 dash like 30 would actually be the MPK ratios. But if it's phosphate and K2O, it essentially comes down to it would be 10 or 20 dash 4.3 dash 16. So it's very hard to figure out without more information on this what exactly Bruce is talking about. But what I can say without any actual information is I guarantee cannabis will go great with this recipe. Very balanced. He will get into his targeted nitrogen level here in a second. But overall, I would expect it, especially in a vegetative state, to do fantastic, no issues whatsoever. But just know that's what's going on here.
Has less phosphorus. Plants need less phosphorus than nitrogen and potassium. So this ratio gives us ample nutrients, provided we're slightly overwatering. And what it really means is about 10% of the water comes out the bottom, and you want to catch it and put it on your lawn, put it somewhere else. It's still fine fertilizer, but when this fertilizer is running through, it helps.
And that's very important, guys. A lot of people ask me, because I run drain to waste, what do you do with your runoff? I literally feed my plants. I have a reservoir it collects in, and then once my reservoir is full, I have a pump with a hose on it, and I literally just pump it out to my lawn and water my lawn with nutrient solution. There's other things to do with it, but if you have a use for it, you can put it to use and let other plants in the world uptake it instead of letting it just run off to wherever it's going to run off. That's a better solution. Got even Bruce telling you to do that.
Just to ensure that there's plenty of nutrients. It's possible to do this with no leaching. It just gets trickier. So how much of this do we put in to the mix? Here's another instrument that you really benefit from. This is an electrical conductivity meter. This particular one sold by Hanna. We use Hanna Instruments. We use these a lot. The more salt in the water, the higher the electrical conductivity. You can tell if your nutrient solution is optimal by measuring this. And let me do a little demo for you. Turn it on. I made 2 beakers. Let's put them right in the front. In fact, I want to put these on a piece of white paper.
Okay, this is a little interesting. We're gonna skip we're gonna skip through this. Essentially, all Bruce is saying that he's so good at his ppm levels and knowing this that he can essentially see how much blue dye is in the water and tell the ppm. You know, that's a little out there, but I guarantee he's probably pretty accurate just because he's been doing this a while.
Is our nutrient solution. It has a blue dye in it, so you can tell when it's there. It should be just perceptible, very light blue. So we put this in tap water. Depends on what part of the country, what part of the world you live in. But tap water is about 0.4. Tap water.
Mm-hmm.
0.4. And the units on this are millisiemens per meter. Now,
that's what my tap water is. My tap water is around 200 ppm, which is around 0.4 EC, or 0.3, 0.4 EC, and that's exactly what it is.
Units are a little bit messy in this because different meters have different units. But here's tap water. Now look what happens with the fertilizer. This is very dilute fertilizer. Put this in here, stir it a second. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. 1.27.
So he says that's very dilute fertilizer. In a second here, he's going to say 1.5 EC is like the ultimate EC that you should be feeding at. So 1.3 is really not that far off. I wouldn't call it super dilute. In fact, in a recirculating system, I would call 1.3 perfect. And we'll look at some studies here that support that from Purdue.
This is 1.27. And I'm going to put about 1.3 nutrient solution. The reason this is important is you can measure the electrical conductivity of this water that you collect. And if this water is between 1 and 1.5, you know your plants are doing well. They're doing great. If you don't water enough, this gets too high and they have too many nutrients. Or if it's a big plant, it could be too low too. So you want to put 1.3 in the top and water enough so this is about 1.3 coming out the bottom. And you measure that with an electrical conductivity meter. This is the fertilizer ratio to get this. I'm running out of room. I'm gonna have to calculate it because I can't remember the number off the top of my head. This is 20% in, and
all right, so this is where he goes into a calculation. He's going to go into a calculation based on if his nutrient solution or his nutrient powder is 20% N, what would it take to get to 120 ppm in a nutrient solution? And that's important because he mentions here, and he will say that he believes 120 ppm of nitrogen is the kind of target nitrogen level for cannabis. And I and many of the formulas that we've used over the years support that number very, very well. Most of the formulas that I personally have dabbled with float between 100 on the low end and 150 ppm on the high end, and rarely ever, if ever, go over that. And when they are at 150, they usually taper down towards the end of flower. And when they're at 100, they usually end up getting a boost for calcium reasons at some point. So really that 120 level you'll see here is very, very accurate. But he's going to do this calculation on Y, and at the end he'll kind of give us how much grams per gallon he's using of certain formulas, and then we'll go into Hydro Buddy and break this down a little bit.
We're going to want to get about 120 ppm in. This is the optimum level of fertilizer. So 120 ppm is 120 milligrams of N per liter. A part per million is exactly the same as a milligram per liter. If you do this, you're going to end up with an honorary degree in horticulture and learn it.
Is it playing for you guys on the OBS or on the stream there? Is he actually showing you guys the calculation, or is Bugbee froze? I'm not quite sure. You guys are going off in chat about your tap water. If your tap water is higher than 200 ppm, you really should think about getting a filter. I'll say that before, but I'm just trying to make sure that this is actually playing for you guys on here, and you can see this calculation.
The fertilizer is only 20%, so this is 0.2 grams of N per 1 gram. I'm going to call this blue because it's the blue fertilizer.
The blue fertilizer. You guys will see it on Instagram. Hashtag the blue crew. That's one of Jax's hashtag because they use blue dye mostly in their calcium nitrate, but also some of their other fertilizers for exactly what Bruce says. So you can know that there's fertilizer in that solution. It's inert. It does not affect the plants in any way. But if you are someone who's like, oh my God, I can't have dye in my fertilizer whatsoever, you can order dye-less fertilizer from Jax. It might take an extra email, or you might get lucky and get the calcium nitrate that has no dye. But if you don't like dye, it can be ordered without it. Anyway, this is why it is called the blue.
So 120 over 0.2 is 600 milligrams per liter. You can see here that.
Sound only still, guys, or is it playing?
600 milligrams per liter equals 120 ppm. Here, this is 0.6 grams per liter. This is grams of blue powder.
Okay. Let me, you can hear the audio. So he just said it's 0.6 grams of blue powder per liter of solution. Let me try to figure out what the hell's going on with this audio or with this video feed here. Just having a slight issue. Okay, we're back. Let's see if this plays here. Come on, Bruce, play for me, buddy.
Blue fertilizer. There's the optimum rate. Now, it doesn't have to be exact. It's close to this, but when I did this study over there with EC, I put in 0.6 grams per liter of blue powder. You don't need to know how to derive it. Just write down that number.
Okay, so he says it. You don't need to know how to do that formula calculation. I think, honestly, guys, I think my internet, just with all these, I have like 5 scenes going here. I think it's just a little slow to want to feed in a YouTube video into this OBS. So just deal with it. Basically, it's going to pop up here, and it says 0.6. Getting a call. 0.6 grams per gallon of his blue solution. And he's saying his blue solution is roughly a 20-10-20 mixture. Well, Jax makes two nutrients that are called general purpose. One's called general purpose and one called peat light. And when you realize what peat light continuous feeding. The NPKs are exactly the same. They alter the micros in the formulas very slightly, but it is Jax Professional General Purpose Feeder 20-10-20 or Jax Professional Peat Light Continuous Feed. Same formula. I would actually go with the continuous light myself, but nonetheless, doesn't really matter. That is what he's using here, and he's using it at 0.6 grams per liter. Well, there's 3.78 liters in 1 U.S. gallon of water. So if we multiply 0.6 by 3.78, we get around 2.26 grams per gallon of 20-10-20. So 2.26 grams per gallon of general purpose 20-10-20 will get you to what Bruce is recommending here. So that's fantastic. Okay, guys, we got audio back. My apologies. I created this scene to show you all this cool stuff with this, and it didn't have the audio portion on it. So anyway, oh, I don't even know where to go then. We missed out on a lot of this. Anyway, this is Hydro Buddy. Yeah, I didn't have the audio in that OBS scene, clearly. Is what it is. Yeah, right when I switch scenes. No, I understand what's wrong. I got it. We'll just go from the beginning. Just pretend those last 5 minutes didn't happen. We're going into Hydro Buddy. This is what it's used to present. This is what I use to present all my nutrient data. This is how I take formulas and break them down from, percentage on the bottle or the bucket to actual ppm of every individual this is just killing. The stream is just, this is way too much for this stream. That's the problem, guys. I apologize. I wish this stream was a little more I wish this stream was streamlined. Ha ha ha. Fucking hilarious. This is pissed off. Anyway, so this is Hydro Buddy. We're going to go in and we are just going to go straight to the results page here. And what I have is a bunch of different, I've got Jax, calcium nitrate, magnesium sulfate, which make up the 3-2-1 formula. I also have MKP, which is what we use for the boost formula. A little most is the micro additive that I use when I use the bloom formula. But more importantly is these bottom ones here. We have Jax outdoor formula and Jax general purpose CF. CF meaning constant feed. The only difference from the regular general purpose here is some of the micros, the NK and P or MP and K are all the exact same. Same with the magnesium and the calcium levels. So nothing major to point. But what Bruce just showed in the last thing was said 120 ppms of nitrogen based on 2.26 grams per gallon of his general purpose feeding. So if we're just going to go straight here and you see these general purpose feeding 20, 10, 20, if we put in 2.26 grams, that is in grams per gallon here, this is what we get. And right here you notice the nitrogen level is 119.406. Extremely close and well within margin to the 120 he was trying to get based on that. And again, he said there's some error and exactly what it is. It's well within error. Don't listen to is the ppm right here. So this is what he gets when he uses 2.26 grams per gallon. That is very interesting because this is an odd ratio to me. And really, it's actually pretty good. There's two things that really stick out at me, but I kind of know why one of them does. The other one, I'm not so sure why. And the one that I kind of know why it sticks out at me is calcium. There's no calcium in this formula here. And the reason is because it's a one part and they don't want it reacting with phosphates and things. I get it. But in order to supplement calcium, you're probably going to have to add nitrogen to the formula in the form of calcium nitrate, or you do it in a calcium carbonate and it's not perfect for a hydroponic setup. But the reason why it's a little different in here, and I think Bruce is getting really good results from it, is because of his medium. Earlier in that video, which we didn't go over, he talks about his ideal medium that they make themselves, and it's essentially 50% peat, 50% vermiculite. And vermiculite has, and then they also supplement with lime and gypsum. So he's supplementing a lot of this calcium and some of the things that are missing in this just general purpose. He's supplementing in his medium, which is similar to a soil, not perfectly like a soil, definitely not a living soil in any way, but similar to the soil when it does have some amendments, versus a pure hydroponic recipe like a cocoa or a rock wool or a pure hydro flowing system, where some of these, like this lime, this gypsum, that would do no good in a hydroponic situation because there's no way to make that calcium plant available or soluble. But it works for his medium very, very well. So I think that's the reason that the calcium level there is low or actually non-existent in this formula. But the one that sticks out at me is the nitrogen potassium ratio, or the N to K ratio here. You notice we're at 120 ppm nitrogen. I agree, that's fantastic. But only 99 parts per million of potassium. Now, if he wanted a actual one-to-one pure potassium based on that, 90 or 83% reduction that I was talking about earlier, it'd be a little different. But anyway, it'd be closer to 1-to-1. But anyway, 99, that's a little low. And especially for a guy that, or I shouldn't say a guy, but like when we have published nutrient recipes across the board, and let's just go here. Let's get back to Chrome. Nutrient recipes across the board from Purdue, and this is exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to tomatoes. So this is a study by Purdue, and it goes through all kinds of nutrients, hydroponic nutrients. But what I want to focus here, and I'll pull some of the slides here, are here's one. Common nutrient ranges. So this is a general range for what you should expect out of your nutrient solutions, what to see. It's a broad range. It goes for a variety of plants. You can see 100 to 250 parts per million of nitrogen. That's a broad range, but for nitrogen, that's one of the elements that certain plants do very, very differently on based on their species and whatnot. But phosphor, you can see 30 to 50 parts per million of phosphor. That's pretty consistent across almost all plants. There's very little that require more and or less than that. More so that require less than that require more. But we keep scrolling down here, and this is a lettuce recipe for closed and open, and essentially they recommend 40% more feeding if it's an open system, and by open, that's drain to waste. By closed, they mean recirculating system. So if it's recirculating, you can feed a lot lower. So like me, I feed 1,000 ppm pretty consistently in cocoa. A recirculating system might only feed 600 ppm. And lately I've been feeding with multiple feeds per day. I've been feeding in the 800 ppm per range. And if that was a pure water system, again, I'd be in the 500 to 600 pure parts per million because it's always active. But what I wanted to show you here was this. This is a leafy green study that shows a couple different formulas, a few different variations on what to use. And essentially we have the JAX, the hydro feed, it's sometimes called the Oasis, the 16-17. Did we lose audio? Please say I made this audio correct. Okay, we did. The 16-4-17. In the center we have JAX hydroponic 3-2-1. Directly, essentially, I think they use a slightly different ratio, so I shouldn't say it's 3-2-1, but it's JAX and calcium nitrate, and they're using it in a way that they get 150 parts per million nitrogen and 162 potassium. Now we go to the far right. Look at that potassium. We're at 210 while still maintaining the same 150 parts per million of nitrogen. To keep this kind of concept on just my kind of interest in why that potassium level is so low for something that's so similar to a tomato or a high light fruiting plant. This is the slide that really nails it down. Optimal ratios of K to N with stages of growth. And this is something tomatoes do. They are one of the one of the plants that really manipulates their nutrient recipe based on what growth stage they are. And this is part of the reason why a lot of the cannabis formulas have bloom boosters and things like that along those lines. Is because of this. And essentially we can say when tomatoes start, they want pretty close to a 1-to-1 ratio. They want a little more potassium than they want nitrogen, but not much. So that's why when I look at Bruce's formula here, I wish that potassium level was a little higher. I would say 120 nitrogen to maybe 150 potassium on the low end would seem a little more in line with what I've seen in the past. But again, if he's got hard data showing otherwise, I'd love to see it, and the world would. But again, that's probably some of the data you need to pay your dues and go to Utah State University and take his courses and pay your tuition and all that good stuff for. Checking in on chat. But anyway, this is something, and then as we start to fruit, they want to get closer to a 2-to-1 ratio, and then by the end of fruit, or kind of the peak of that, they want a 2.5-to-1 ratio of calcium, or of, I really need to get my elements straight here, potassium, K, to nitrogen. So that's the one. It's really just the potassium in Bruce's suggestion that I'm a little curious on. He says it's general purpose. So if he were to make a pure fruiting formula for cannabis, would it be higher in potassium? And what are his thoughts on calcium? That's also a question I have for Bruce. I'd love to talk to him. I've met him one time in my life, thanks to Robert at Apache, but it was before he knew what I was, before I was anything, knew anything, had any kind of knowledge on nutrients whatsoever. So now that my knowledge is deeper, I would love to learn from him or just go to his classes, honestly. But anyway, I'd love to say, why are you recommending kind of lower potassium? Is that just not needed? Are we overdoing it? And if so, if it is overdone, that might have to do with some of the magnesium, quote unquote deficiencies we see under LEDs possibly. Could it be that we have so much potassium that it's antagonizing our magnesium uptake and calcium's getting away with it because it's combined with nitrate? There's theories. There's many theories out here. And I'm not the one to test them, but if someone's got data on them, I'd love to see. So anyway, that, and what's the deal with calcium? Like I say, my presumption on this, and it is a presumption, I'm just guessing based on the information he's given so far, that they have a high calcium media, essentially, with the gypsum and the lime, and the vermiculite in there. Like, what? They have high calcium. So their overall feeding is not lacking calcium, but their solution, they don't need to add so much calcium. So that's a little interesting to me. So yeah, that's it. We'll keep going. We'll keep going in the video here.
But the instructions come with that on the fertilizer. Let me show you briefly the vast array of fertilizers that commercial growers use. This is my folder. Now, I know everybody looks this stuff up on the internet, but I grew up in a time before the internet, so I still use paper. Here's one of the charts with all the fertilizers. These are called Jack's fertilizers. There's Peter's fertilizers. These are all...
There's Jack's fertilizers. There's Peter's fertilizers. That's exactly right. Notice what he's using here, guys. He's using Jack's Professional. He's using Jack's Professional. He's using Peter's Professional because they are essentially the same thing. Peter's was the originator, started a long time ago. I believe his name was Bob Peters. I could be wrong on this. But essentially, Bob Peters started Peter's formula. They did all this stuff, produced it. Then his son, Jack, came along, took over the business, got his hands in horticulture a little bit, was playing around and said, hey, these are great, but it needs a little more magnesium. It needs a little more of this. So he tweaked the Peters formula, which then came out as Jack's. So 5-11-26 or 5-11-25 went from 5-12-26. And it's very, very close. Now, with that said, let's go back to this real quick and go back to that Purdue study and say that this isn't really important for us here, but I just like to point out that fertilizers change. And this is it. So this is Peter's Professional, this slide right here. We have Peter's Professional and Jack's Hydroponic. Notice 5-11-26 and 5-12-26. So originally, Bob Peters said, I like this. His son Jack said it needs a little tweaking, and he made this. Now, these are the exact numbers you get when you mix it at their recommended strength. And you'll notice it's damn near consistent across the board. And I'll just get to you right now, they added more sulfur. That's it. They added more sulfur. I'm not exactly sure what they did to the formula, but I presume it had to do with a little more potassium sulfate and a little more magnesium sulfate. Now, with that said, they didn't really increase the magnesium levels all that much. It only went from what you see here, 60 ppm to 63, but they got the sulfur up, which is very important for flavor and things like that in plants. The phosphor went down, but we'll say went up, but going from 48 to 52, very marginal, and going from 216 to 215, that's just margin of error of the calculation there. These are essentially the same thing that's just progressed over the time. So if you cannot get Jack's Hydroponics out there in the world, you might be able to get your hands on Peter's Professional and just know that it is essentially the same thing. And if anything, it just appreciates that magnesium sulfate addition or Epsom salt addition even more. So this is his formula. Actually, you know what? Before we go into this, let's just keep going on the video. Let Mr. Bruce finish his presentation here, at least what we need.
Specialty fertilizers for specialty applications. To my knowledge, these guys aren't marketing a special cannabis fertilizer at the moment, but if they did, they should be selling 20-10-20.
Okay, that's a great point. These guys aren't marketing specific cannabis recipes yet, but if they should, it should be 20-10-20. Well, they already sell a 20-10-20, so they don't need to make one specifically for cannabis. But they do make many things specifically for cannabis, and that's how the 3-2-1 formula is pretty much figured out. It's not directly a cannabis, but it's pretty close, and what we've tailored it to is. And if we listen to Mel Frank, and I've done in my past videos, the 3-1-4 ratio of actual NPK, not phosphate and K2O. 3-1-4 is a great ratio. Bruce recommended a little different, but nonetheless, 3-1-4, that's the 3-2-1. They do have what I just showed you guys here. We'll go back to Hydro Buddy, this outdoor formula. What you see is outdoor. If you go onto Jack's website, that's specifically for cannabis hemp. This outdoor Jack's formula is specifically for cannabis. It's new, and I think it's pretty good. I have some issues with it, just like I have issues with every form, everything. Nothing's perfect, but it's pretty good. So just take a note of what we have here. We're going to zero this out, and we're going to do that same 2.26 grams per gallon here of this. Okay, that's not quite enough to get to our 120 ppm of nitrogen. We're trying to hit that 120 ppm of nitrogen. Okay, so we'll go with 2.55. Okay, close enough for me. Now this formula, to me, is a little closer. It's really, really similar. It's really, really similar to Bruce's, sorry, I'm trying to get those cursors off your screen for you guys. Thing trips out when I do it. It's very, very similar to Bruce's, but it has just a little bit more potassium. Not much. It's basically that 1-to-1 ratio, but it still has no calcium, so it would do really good. It's basically what I would recommend. I think Bruce would get a kick out of it. I think he'd like it. A touch more calcium. All the rest of the numbers are fairly similar. It's pretty close, but this is what Jax is saying, and they've said that they've tested and talked with farmers and things like that. And they found that this ratio works great. And again, back to the very beginning of this video, there's 20, 25 different ratios out there right now that work fantastic with cannabis, that anyone would be hard to argue one's better than the other. Just know that. But Jack says this one's great. Bruce says this one's great. They're really, really close. 3-to-1, a little different, but Mel Frank says that ratio is great. So how, oh, crazy. But anyway, this actual Jack's outdoor cannabis one, I don't think a lot of people know about. It's a little new. And for the guys who want a one part and outdoor, or the guys who are doing soil and already have good calcium content with lime and things like that, this is a great option. And again, it's really close to what Bruce is recommending. So I wanted to throw that out there as just so you guys know what's going on. Peter said Pete Light. Nice, Greg. You were actually Greg McAllister in chat here. He's actually one of the ones who brought this to my attention, because I watched the video and I didn't really think about it, because like I say, I know there's no one right answer for nutrients in cannabis, but then I started going into Bruce's thing, and that's when I came up with, well, are we talking actual P and K here? Are we talking phosphates and oxalates? But anyway, Greg brought it up, and then he says in here, Pete Light is the closest to the greenhouse. Well, that's exactly, Greg, this general purpose that we're calculating with right here, general purpose CF, that stands for constant feed, and before constant feed is actually general purpose Pete Light. This is the actual formula, and it's the closest to what you're talking about there, and this is the closest to what Bugbee would be using. Again, and I think the 18.823 is slightly better in my opinion, but again, I don't have data saying it's better, and I haven't had data saying it's not better. These are just general things, but we're starting to get a consensus. That's the nice thing. What's starting with all this shit show of information and nutrients and things, we're starting to get a consensus, and the consensus is that it's a super similar plant, just like all other C3 plants that it is, and that's been consistent for a while. And people get annoyed at it that we haven't figured that out yet, and they think cannabis is so special. But that is it. It's not. It's very adaptive. It works well with a lot of different recipes.
Because after a lot of analysis, this is what we've gone to here. These are sold by many companies. Peter's Fertilizer is a famous brand name. Jack's is essentially the same thing. They're available in stores. You can buy these in small packets. We buy them in 25-pound bags, a whole pallet load of them, because we're going through a lot of them.
I'm just going to let you listen because it's easier.
This is the ratio of fertilizer applied at this concentration to get, and you're going to buy an EC meter to make sure you didn't make a math error, to get about 1.2 to 1.3 of your EC, and a very slight blue color. After a while, you get so good you can tell the EC from looking at the color. If you don't want to fertilize daily, it is possible to put in a slow-release fertilizer. Here's some pellets. This is a product called
I don't think this is anything that we would recommend, or any like true connoisseur, craft grower is going to want to do. But this is just an option. Bruce is saying in general, it's just like other plants, and slow release fertilizers would work on it as well. I wouldn't recommend this, but that's just,
Nutricode. You can put these, and these come in various release rates. They're not as precise as watering each day with fertilizer like this. But for some kinds of studies, if there's reasons you can't do a liquid feed or a straight hydroponics, you can put slow release fertilizer in the bucket. Water. You got to learn to...
All right, and that pretty much wraps it up for nutrients when it comes to that video. Again, there's a little bit about his substrate, his actual medium that he's making. Before that I think if you guys are watching this video, you better watch that part too, because I believe it's key to why his nutrients is successful. But yeah, so that's what Bruce says, and I think it's accurate. I'm just curious on, is it another one of those very general formulas, or is it something that we can definitively say that this is going to yield more biomass, more quality biomass than any other formula? And I don't have any data. I tell you guys all the time, 3-2-1 is the best I've ever used. I have a formula called the GG Boost, but I have no data or grows other than they've been great grows, but nothing statistically higher than any other ones that I can present. So I think just the more data points we can get at that point, the better, and then we take it for everything it's worth and nothing as a hard fact, one and only way. We can all benefit from this, and it's great to see Bruce doing it, because I can tell you guys stuff all the time, but Gigi in his garage here telling you about nutrient solutions, you're like, who the fuck is this guy? And I understand that, I get that. You're more than welcome to go check my data, check my information anytime. I present it as fact as I know it, and to the data presents it, but you guys are always welcome to double check, present corrections if they're needed, this or that. Just don't be a dick about it. No one likes, just present it as you would any other scientific study. Say, well, here's what you said, and it's slightly off, and here's the correct thing, and make sure you cite things. You guys go on forums all the time, and they'll never have citation. They'll say, oh, well, this is this and this, but you guys went to school. You guys all know how to do a 5-paragraph essay. You started out with an intro that says, this is my hypothesis. This is what I think should happen, blah, 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 blah. Then you have a minimum of 3 supporting paragraphs, each with 2 to 3 citations. Citation meaning an actual scientifically, like, factual statement from somewhere, actual literature, online, something. You quote that, and then you give your opinion on that. And when you quote it, you actually give the parentheses like, this can be found in this book on page this, chapter, blah, 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 blah. This is a basic citation. Again, you guys all learned this in elementary school, high school, and it's how you hopefully graduated by doing this. That you guys should just make sure you present and cite wherever you can. But again, nothing that says hard fact. And I understand, oh, I'm criticizing Bruce. I'm not criticizing Bruce in any way. I agree with everything he's saying. I'm just saying based on everything we know and the lack of data that we have from Bruce, and he doesn't mean to like not give a lack of data. He's making a video. He's not expected to be like, by the way, that's real phosphor, not phosphate we're talking here. Those details slip, but if he were to write a paper on this, and I'm sure he has them and has written papers on this, all that data is cited, all his data is put into tables. This is all here. I know Bruce has this. I'm not saying he doesn't. So this is just me commentating on a video based on what others have brought to my attention, the knowledge and the facts that I know on it, and the data that I have. And I'm presenting it here to you guys with tables, with actual hard factual numbers of what's going on. So just, again, it's partial opinion, it's partial fact, but we have backing from it on both sides. Again, this goes down to the beginning of my statement that general purpose is exactly that. General purpose, and cannabis is fantastic at using general feedings. It works great. It's adaptive. It does fantastic. And yes, it doesn't have to be Jax. There's a number of different nutrient regimens out here you could make any one of these ratios with. It doesn't have to be Jax. It doesn't have to be J.R. Peters. It could be anything. NPK and all your micros don't care what name brand is up there. Now, you shouldn't say you should go for absolute dog shit nutrient quality that has, you know, heavy metals or just excess waste in there. You should go for some quality calcium nitrate that doesn't have participants and doesn't leave stuff at the bottom of your reservoir. You should go for quality mixes. But when it comes down to it, if your mix has this NPK and this breakdown, when it's analyzed, it's going to be successful. David Smith, there you go. 3% cal, 15, 5, 20. That could be a really good ratio. That could work quite well. See, I like Jax. The reason I like Jax Hydro so much is because it can be used in a hydroponic setup. It's designed so it doesn't need any ammonification or nitrification processes. It doesn't have to break down or solubilize calcium into soluble forms. Like calcium carbonate isn't plant available in any way, and it's limestone, guys. It takes forever for water to erode it enough to mix it up that it's plant available. So calcium nitrate, which is like the basis of the 12 the 321 or the hydroponic formulas, that's a big difference from what's in these. And so I'd be curious what Bruce recommends when he's in an NFT system or a deep water culture system. There's a lot of things. And again, I have no purpose to this video other than just thinking out loud and just telling you guys my thoughts, my questions, and where I'm coming from. Anyone use 321 in DWC? Yes, Low Key Grow uses well, he's moved on to Floraflex because he likes the solubility, but I think he could go back anytime because Jax is up there, claims solubility. Anyway, he ran 321 in DWC forever. Grononymous, who's no longer on here, I think he goes... Anyway, Grononymous ran it in Flood and Drain. And when you do, you just lower the concentration a little bit. DWC guys should run at around 600 to 700 ppm, as we're like Drain to Waste, and cocoa growers will run at 700 or 800 to 1000 ppm. It's just a lower concentration because it's always in there, always touching. So that's where I'm at, guys. Chat's going pretty nuts here. I haven't been trying to keep up, but it is tough. This really was just kind of a me blabbing along. There was some good comments in here. I tried to pick up as much as possible, but I'm going to end this stream soon. Just going to let it phase out here, get some things in, and see if I can catch up on. But chat's going pretty well, and when this replays, you guys can all read chat. Things. Yeah, Greg, see, he uses that's why I said he uses dolomite and gypsum for his calcium and magnesium, but that would never work in a pure hydroponic liquid situation. It just wouldn't work. Those aren't soluble forms. So what would he do in that situation? Get it? So that's why I'm saying Bruce's formula, what he's recommending here, is highly dependent on the medium that he's made to put it in. As where if there was a completely inert medium, ProMix, Rockwool, cocoa for the most part, it's got a higher cation exchange, but cocoa for the most part, I think there's some tweaks needed. I could be totally wrong. Bruce could say, no, this works across the board. But having zero calcium, plant needs calcium. So it's getting it somewhere. It's getting it from his medium. That's my one thing. I don't know. Have I tried EDTA calcium? I have some ordered. I had a small sample batch about 2 years ago. I got some, and I liked it. Didn't have too many issues with it, but I also didn't. I only used it at the end of flower when I was trying to taper out nitrogen but keep my calcium levels up, and that's the only time I would majorly use it for. But I could see adding it to Bruce's recipe could be a good way to do it as well. It's just more my curious of, okay, he's getting his calcium from somewhere else. Well, how much calcium is his plant, are his plants getting from there? We still need to know, like, what would be your target calcium uptake or calcium levels in a pure hydroponic setup. So, you know, I have questions. Like I say, I'm curious. I'm very interested on the data behind it. I like I say, I don't say it's wrong. I don't say it's right. I say it's, yeah, just take it for what it's worth. It's my opinion and just my brainstorm on this. I've had a couple comments here. Can't believe you're talking shit on Bruce. Again, not talking shit on Bruce, just commentating on the data presented. If I was in his class, I would have raised my hand instantly and said, yes, Dr. Bugbee. Okay, we're back up. Sorry. One hit. Yes, they are. They actually are different. They do have a micro content in there with the vermiculite, as well as his addition of dolomite and gypsum are highly skewing his calcium and magnesium levels based on if you only looked at the solution. So that's, you know, go back and watch here. Tell Hybrid to go fuck himself while you're at it too. But yeah, feel free to rewind, relearn, and get with the program, buddy. Yes, high potassium. And so Greg, again, go back, listen, you've got some good questions. Most of your questions are things you've presented in the chat here. We've already talked about here. And that was my thing that said, okay, well, if he's talking high potassium could antagonize magnesium. I said it earlier in this video. Could that be a reason we're seeing purple stems? I've only had one guy leaf tissue test his samples of his purple stemmed leaves, and I've already messed up myself here. They're not purple stems, they're purple petioles, people. There is a major difference between a petiole, which is there is a stem, which is the plant, and then there's the leaf stem. The leaf stem is called a petiole, and its purpleness is not directly related to the deficiencies that the actual stem's purpleness is, and that's a very big point there. So how we test and how we base our deficiencies is very important. Anyway, someone tested their purple deficient stems and did find that they were phosphor deficient. So they were low on phosphor. Now I've used formulas that increase your that we've increased magnesium directly, and I've used formulas we've increased phosphor directly, and neither of them have directly address the problem, at least not perfectly, but maybe that's something we have a potassium antagonistic relationship going. We're not quite sure. It really just doesn't add up. But again, that's the things that as we get more data points out there, we can start to correlate, and we can maybe do some specific tests. I'll just say right now, if the next kind of grow that would be going in here would essentially be a 3-2-1 mix versus a Bruce's mix. But the kind of the issue with that is, again, it goes back to the medium issue that I've presented here with Bruce's mix. I'd like to find a way that we could do a couple well-recommended inert mediums. So cocoa would be how I'd probably do it, but we could even do rock wool or something that's truly inert. And truly inert, and do a little comparison, but again, without the actual data on what the available calcium in his medium is, it's just a little it wouldn't be a controlled grow in any way. But I am curious, and I'd love to do it. So okay, guys, it is Saturday, coming up on 1 o'clock. I think I'm going to get my day started, but I think it's been a solid solid little presentation. Again, this is just my general thoughts based on the limited data that's been presented so far and the data that I have, as well as calculations and everything that we've done in the past, again, with HydroBuddy. And I've done this with you know, you name, especially the dry nutrient lines. If you can name a dry nutrient line that I haven't analyzed, I would be pretty surprised, and I'm sure you guys will come up with one. That's not a challenge by any means. Don't just throw 100 at me, but you get the point. I've analyzed a lot, and I've seen grows with all of them, and they are all what I would call successful grows for the most part. So to say one is hard, fast, better than the other in this nutrient recipe world is just, it's very, very hard to say that. So let's just keep taking the data points and go from there. So go in here, and guys, feel free to start to say your goodbyes. And we will shut it down here, guys. So talk to you guys later. Peace.